Ladies and gentlemen, back today on the podcast is the man of the hour, Jack Mullaney, who was a finance major who never ran professionally, no NCAA title on his resume, no decorated athletic career, and 2 years ago, many people thought the job was too big for him. But today, Jack Mullaney coaches some of the fastest distance runners on the planet, and he believes the secret has nothing to do with training plans. It's the conversation you have when an athlete disagrees with you. It's knowing the difference between a workout that builds fitness and one that just makes you tired. It's heating the room 1 degree at a time until the ice cube finally melts. Listen to the conversation if you're confused about that analogy, because this one is full of analogies, stories, and wisdom that will help you take your running to the next level. My conversations with Jack always inspire me, enlighten me, and remind me why I love my job so much. So if this one hits, follow the podcast for more conversations like this in the future. Drop a 5-star review. It takes less than 5 seconds to do so, and share the podcast with a coach or a runner who needs it. Let's get into this legendary conversation with a remarkable coach and a human being who I respect a ton, Mr. Jack Mullaney. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a saying, Jack, he's not back, he's better. I think that phrase even applies to the coaches here, because last time we had you on, it was early into your tenure as a professional coach, first time around with HOKA NAZ Elite. And since then, your athletes have run some remarkable performances. So first of all, congrats on the success, and thanks for joining me again. Always love our conversations.
Well, thanks for having me. And I guess I was telling somebody this morning. Any time you give a coach credit, you need to start with the athletes, and just feel really fortunate to work with the athletes that I do. And it's been a fun couple of years.
So professional running coach, had some experience at the NCAA level, but have the privilege of working with the fastest and brightest who wear the HOKA logo, the bird on their feet, on their singlet. A lot of people listening today are next generation of runners, up and coming runners, high school, collegiate, maybe some middle schoolers in there, or parents of those demographics who have a passion for seeing their kids' dreams through. Speaking specifically to that audience, let's call it a 14-year-old, sees Alex Masai, sees Olin Hacker, wants to be like that one day. What is the number one thing you think a kid can do to maximize their chance of becoming a professional runner one day?
There's an analogy that I use with our team a lot, and it speaks to the value of consistency, but it's this analogy of heating the room. So if you imagine that you're in a room that's 0 degrees Fahrenheit and there's an ice cube in the middle of the room, and you're told that your objective is to melt the ice cube, but you can only raise the temperature of the room 1 degree every single day. If you show up on day 1 and you raise the temperature of the room 1 degree, it's going to be 1 degree Fahrenheit. At the end of the day, you're still going to have an ice cube. And day 2, you show up, you're going to raise the temperature of the room 1 degree, and you're still going to have an ice cube at the end of the day. And you have to do this every single day. You have to keep showing up and raising the temperature of the room 1 degree until you hit day 33. And there's nothing special that happens on day 33. It's actually very similar to everything that's happened on days 1 through 32. But because you hit that threshold of 32.6 degrees, the ice cube is going to melt. And I try to remind our athletes that I think a lot of times we start to dream about melting the ice cube, the metaphorical ice cube, and really the act that melts the ice cube is showing up every single day and heating the room. And it's actually not maybe the thing that people are thinking about. And I think a lot of times people have these dreams when they're younger of, I want to run in college, or I want to run at a certain division in college, or I want to run professional, or I want to make the Olympics. And to me, those are all ice cubes to be melted. But what you really want to be thinking about is heating the room every single day. In other words, showing up, executing the training that you have on paper, recovering appropriately, and getting ready for the next day. And when you have that mindset of every single day, I'm going to show up and heat the room, eventually the results just start taking care of themselves, but you start to embrace that process of heating the room and, quite frankly, really enjoying it. So if I had any piece of advice for athletes is really to start enjoying and investing in that day-to-day process, because at the end of the day, it's consistency. I think that's going to lead them to where they want to go.
Whether it's your own athletes or studying other athletes and Flagstaff for the best athletes around the world, those who make it the farthest in the sport, do you think they're driven by, the sort of metric success in the sport, whether it's records, times, medals, championships? Or do you think the best are motivated simply by the just enjoyment and pursuit of the sport? And we don't even need to have a conversation of which one is more sustainable. I think you and I know what that is. But if you had to say, the best athletes that you've studied, which do you think gets them farther?
Well, look, I think I'm realistic, and I think a lot of people are motivated by competitive success. And I think there is a certain level of, I want to run a certain time, or I want to run really fast, and that's what motivates people. But what I would say is, in observing some of the best athletes in the world and some of the best athletes that I've coached, is there's a direct translation between what they say and their desires to do those things and their day-to-day actions that they take to put themselves in position to be able to do it. I think a lot of the top athletes that I've kind of compared their mentality to that of a surgeon or that of a firefighter, which is that the work is the work. And, if you're a surgeon and you show up on a day when maybe you feel a little tired, or maybe you're, in a mood or something like that, someone's life is on your operating table. And so all that stuff doesn't really matter anymore. The work is the work and you have to execute. Similar to a firefighter, right? Most of the time when people see fire, they run away. Firefighters, you got to go into that fire and be willing to kind of be in that uncomfortable spot, in that uncomfortable environment. And that's what I've noticed is these athletes, they're not afraid to do the work. They're not afraid to execute, even on days when they don't feel great. And when there's a race that might be intimidating or might be something that most people would run away from, they are able to run right at it and give their best. And I think that maybe is more the separator than anything else.
We'll nail it down to one thing. Is there one similarity you see in the athletes you coach on their journey to becoming professional runners, whether it's a mindset, training? I guarantee most weren't doing double threshold back in the day, but is there one commonality between the athletes you coach that you feel like helps propel them to the professional level?
I think it'd be challenging to distill it down to just one.
Give me a couple then, off the top of your head.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it really speaks to my values as a coach, and it's what kind of inspired those in a lot of ways. I think just about every top athlete that I've coached is a good communicator. They're really good at expressing their feelings, their emotions, their thoughts, so that you really can get a good alignment with them as a coach. They are a relentless competitor. They're always trying to get the most out of themselves. I think they see competition as a vehicle to get the most out of themselves. They're excited about it. They don't see it as like an evaluation of who they are as a person or their value as a person. I think they just see it as a way to see how they're doing and a way to see how good they can be. There's a certain consistency about all the top athletes that I've coached. And that's not just, necessarily showing up and every day and executing, but it's also what they do outside of practice, just a 24/7 lifestyle. I think one of the things, Alex Masai comes to mind, for example. One of the things I think that makes him really great is he's really good at understanding the whole picture of a training plan or a training block, and understanding that, at the end of every session that he does, recovery and preparation for the next session starts almost immediately. And based on whatever the ask for that next session is, he's kind of preparing himself appropriately based on what he needs to eat, how he needs to recover, how slow or fast he needs to go on his easy runs and the lead up to that. So I think that's another thing. Every athlete that I feel like has really made a breakthrough has had a certain level of curiosity to see how good they can be. I think so often, maybe it's just out of nerves, but when you talk to athletes and you try to tell them, open their eyes to maybe what they can achieve, they tell you why they can't. And I think those who have finally kind of accepted, hey, let's go try, let's go see what I can do, and have that curiosity about how good they can be, really tend to do well. And then I think the last one is compassion. I think you have to have compassion for yourself, because it's not a linear path and you're going to go through setbacks. And I've seen people who I think possess that value of self-compassion are able to handle maybe some of the setbacks a little bit better and get back on track a little bit faster than maybe some people who aren't. And then also people that are just compassionate teammates. This is, as much as we want to think it's an individual sport, it's a team sport. You get better by by working with other people, learning from other people, and having other people push you. And so if you can operate in that type of environment where you're working with other people, I think that can help you as an individual get better too.
Such good wisdom there. I always love my conversations with you because I know they'll be a wealth of knowledge pools. You just pass it out to people in the sport who are interested. So I appreciate all the insights there. Speaking specifically on the communication piece, I've never asked a coach this, but I think you're a good one to ask this question. What do you do when an athlete disagrees with you, and how common is that in the sport? And I imagine for you, you don't always want athletes who just listen and just, you probably want athletes who ask, why are we doing this? Should we be doing this? Why am I in the 3K versus the mile for this race? I don't want to do this. Is this too much threshold? How do you answer some of those questions that I would assume over, years of coaching athletes are inevitably going to come up?
I think the first thing to realize as a coach is when an athlete is asking a question, it's because deep down they're really invested in their own success and they just want to make sure that what they're doing is something that they can believe in. And I try to always be cognizant of the fact that at the end of the day, the athlete is the one that's going to have to execute the training and they're the one that's going to be in the race. And what controls those things is the athlete's mind. And so you do want to create a certain level of alignment with an athlete. And I actually think it's probably one of the most important things that you can do as a coach is try to create alignment. And the way that you do that is through repeated communication and constant reminders to the athlete that you care about their future. And you show that by investing in how much you care about the details of their workout, but also how much you care about them as a person. I would say more than half of my communication with athletes is just about life and how they're doing in life. Because you want the athlete to feel like, you care about them as a person. And I think that's a good place to start. But it has to be a constant thing. And I'm still trying to get better at this as a coach. I'm even trying to schedule my days so that I'm being really intentional about communicating with the athletes, just so that's like I don't miss it. Because I think anytime communication falters, negativity fills the gap. And that's just because people are left to assume. And we're in a sport that's really high pressure at times. It's not easy. And so I think anytime you don't have that reassurance as an athlete, or that constant communication from your coach, I think it can be easy for the mind to start to go places that it doesn't always need to go, or that wouldn't serve you really well. So I would first say that it's just so important to see those conversations with an athlete as like it's coming from a good place. And then that's when you got to really lean into the value of curiosity, and just say like, hey, so, help me understand kind of why do you think that way? What's been your experience? And usually you can kind of piece together where the athlete is coming from. And then you can kind of piece together where you were coming from as a coach, and you can kind of start to see where maybe things got a little sideways and help the athlete get back on track. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do, is just reach a greater sense of understanding with the athlete. Sometimes they bring up information that I didn't know before, and that does actually kind of change what we're trying to do. Other times they bring up stuff that maybe is just I didn't do a good enough job of communicating to them what my intention was, and so then I just need to kind of double down on what I meant. And so I actually have grown to really like those conversations, because after them, usually we reach a better place of alignment than we were going into them. And ultimately that's kind of the goal of what we're trying to achieve. So it actually is a positive thing. I would say it happens, occasionally. I think the more you work with an athlete, the more you know their communication tendencies, the more you know how much, what needs to be said, when it needs to be said. But yeah, it's still definitely still something that happens even with athletes who I coached from day one when I started here at NAZ Elite.
Would you say coaching is the ultimate ego killer, just in terms of, if an athlete pushes back or when an athlete races bad, like how do you separate your identity as a person from the results of your athletes, whether in workout? I mean, you literally have daily things that you could pin on your identity as a coach, whether a workout didn't go well or an athlete's Achilles flared up and you're like, oh shoot, did I give him too much mileage? How do you separate those two things?
For me, where I'm at with that right now is I feel like it was very important for me to get clear on what success was for me as an individual and really be true to that. And so for me, I talk a lot about my values as a coach, which are connection, competition, consistency, curiosity, and compassion. And those values are values that I've picked up along the way in being in this sport that I feel contribute to success. And so I need to make sure that I'm living my days in alignment with those values. So every night before I go to bed, I get out my notebook and I plan my day for the next day. And every slot of time is I'm trying to orient it around those values. So even if it's practice for that day, I need to have some notes of how do I need to connect with each of these athletes during that day? What do I need to say as it relates to preparing them for the competition that's coming up? So that we're reinstilling those values. And I really try to make sure that, yeah, my schedule reflects the type of person that I want to become, and also reflects the type of values that I'm trying to teach to our team or instill in our team. And that's how I value how well I'm doing. And I know at the end of the day that externally I'm going to be evaluated based on the results of the team. I think that's unavoidable, but I don't think that I don't think I'm at my best if I'm only focused on judging everything based off of outcomes. It gets back to that heating the room idea. You're going to be judged whether or not the ice cube melts, but I need to be judging myself on whether or not I'm heating the room every single day. Because if I'm only judging it based off the ice cube, I'm going to drive myself crazy.
And I think the coaches or athletes who are only fixated on results, that's where I think there's no logical case for doping, but that's where I can rationalize people who go to that extreme. Because if that's the only thing that matters, why would you not take every shortcut to get the result? If that's all you care about, right? Why not, put it all on red and see if you win big or you crash? And that's why I think our sport needs to incentivize things more than winning, which is why I always love when we praise the athletes for their vulnerability and sharing their story, or the different sort of key metrics that influence an athlete's success, rather than, did you just win gold? Because there are athletes that, I could chat GPT right now from the 2000s who won a ton of things that you and I wouldn't know because they didn't really make much of a dent or an impact outside of, their records or results. And I think we get into this, and we're seeing in the NCAA right now, we get into this tricky soup of, ADs are only prioritizing championships. So then coaches, knowing that their salary and their livelihood depends on championships, they're going to, even though it's legal, they're going to take the quote unquote shortcuts and go get their top 5 from a different country. On paper, it's fine. But if we're only incentivizing championships, you're going to get negative results that come with it, like screwing the 410 high school kid from America who now can't get any looks from a D1 school.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we're at an interesting crossroads, especially at the NCAA level, because you're right. It's just outcomes are the only thing that's incentivized, and I think we all understand why, but it does get away from what I feel like has been the gem of the NCAA system for so long. I mean, I coached with Rob Connor and Ian Soloff at the University of Portland for 6 years. And what I took so much pride in and what I thought was so special about that place was you really came in as maybe as a kid and you left as an adult in a lot of ways, because the program was so good at not just developing good runners, but I felt like there was a lot that developed you in the way of, just becoming a better person. And I'm not sure, because I'm not in the collegiate system, what it's like now. But I do think maybe some of that has been lost, because there's just such a rush of producing these outcomes that for most people take a lot of time to develop towards. And yeah, so I don't have the perfect solution, but I do think that we maybe need to evaluate exactly how we're incentivizing and rewarding the NCAA system right now.
Going back to the communication piece with your athletes, your capacity to do that is directly related to the quantity and the amount. If you had 100 athletes, your level of quality and attention and care would be less. And in the NCAA, you have a set amount of scholarships, set amount of kind of roster spots. Those are always going to get filled up, and it's going to stay at that point. This is a conversation above you. I know the sports marketing people at HOKA or On or Nike, they dictate a lot of these conversations, how many people are on the team, what the salaries are possible, team expansion, team de-expansion, whatever it looks like. So I know this conversation is a little above your pay grade, quite literally, but as much as you can influence and control, what are your thoughts on, team size for a professional running team, specifically as it relates to, wanting to have a healthy list of quality athletes across multiple distances, but also not stretching yourself too thin where your ability to coach and coach humans and athletes maybe gets watered down if you have too many individuals on a team?
I think you hit on an important part there, just in how you phrase the question, which is maybe how many events you're trying to cover on a team. And I would say that the more events that you're trying to cover, probably the fewer athletes that you want to have overall. Because when you have a lot of athletes that are doing the same event and largely preparing for the same races, I think creating overlap in training is a lot more possible. But if you have an 800-meter runner and you have a marathoner, they're not going to overlap a whole lot. And so then you're not going to be able to be in both places at once. And so when you measure bandwidth, I think if you're only trying to have, say you're only trying to be a marathon team, you can probably have more people in total than if you're trying to cover everything from the 800 up to the marathon. Maybe you only want to have 2 to 3 people, so they have training partners, but per event. I think that's an important thing. And then I don't know. I mean, we have 11 right now on our team at NAZ Elite. I think we could probably have a few more. But part of it also, I think, is doing a really good job in the recruiting process of understanding what type of athletes have an alignment with your team, with you as a coach, and with the environment, and probably won't require an outsized amount of your time. I think that's important too. So just being really cognizant of who you bring into the team and really valuing that at a high level, to make sure it's not somebody that you're going to be having to have 2 to 3 hour meetings with every single week, because there's always something that's a little bit off.
HOKA throughout the years, I feel like every year they put a little more investment in their different buckets of interest, and competitive performance over the past few years, I feel like has been at the forefront of their minds. Even recently at an executive level, Steve DeCoker left On to come and join HOKA. For those who aren't aware, he really was the spearheader of the OAC with On and hiring Dathan and Andrew Weeding and all those people. And fun fact, Jack, he was he probably wouldn't even remember me, but years ago I had him on the podcast. To this day, of the 700 episodes, only 2 episodes have ever gotten accidentally deleted. He was an unfortunate part of one of those 2. I forget who the second guest was, but I remember his. All that being said, he came over to HOKA. I know he's going to make a strong push for better, more performance. You even look at the NIL side over the past years, signing Colin Solomon and Hoptum Samuel, who just won an NCAA title. And then I know this isn't related to your group, but like even signing Sinclair Johnson, HOKA is really pushing the bar forward. Their footwear years ago, I can say this as an unbiased source, wasn't, I don't think, up to par years ago. Now I think, as someone who tries all the shoes, it's just as good as anyone else, if not better. The apparel is remarkable and the brand's exploding. As the head coach of kind of the prominent HOKA group, how do you feel about being a part of a brand who is really starting to see its wings and explode? Because, NAZ Elite 10 years ago, all respect and love in the world for what Ben did with the group. They were great, but they were always kind of viewed, again, this is my personal opinion, as kind of a B tier program. Now across this, or just like a marathon program, that's kind of what they did. Now it's like you guys have people across distances crushing it. And it's been cool to see what the group has kind of transformed into.
I think it's been a really cool story for both our team and for the brand, because I feel like both HOKA and NAZ Elite have grown simultaneously alongside each other, to the point where, we're now kind of rewriting our team record book and having some of the best performances that we've ever had as a team, and HOKA's enjoying some of the largest sales that they've ever had and producing some of the best products in the market as well. So it's been really cool to be a part of that. And I realized that I sort of hopped on the train when it was already kind of moving pretty fast, which is a fun spot to be in. I think, Ben and his wife Jen, they really deserve so much credit for kind of building it from the ground up. And some of the initial people that started the HOKA brand, branching off from Solomon, I think is the origin story. Like, they get so much credit for believing in it and investing so much of their time and money before it was even anything popular, and just believing in it. But to your point about Steve, first of all, I think Steve would be a great guest on this podcast. So if that episode got deleted, it would be a good one to have. But it's really been cool to have Steve aboard, just because he was so instrumental with the Brooks Beasts back in the day, when he worked there, and then obviously starting the OAC. He believes so much in the team model, which is really exciting, and just been really invested in creating an alignment from HOKA to us as coaches down to the athletes, and really asking us, what we need to be successful, both from a perspective of the athletes that we're bringing into the team, but as well as the resources. And that's been really fun. I feel like, organizations achieve success when there's alignment all the way up and down. And Steve's been super instrumental in creating that since he's come aboard. So it's an exciting time. And then on the product side, I think now that the shoe is out, the Cielo X1 3.0, which is HOKA's latest road shoe that they came out with. That's the shoe that Alex Masai wore in Chicago when he ran 204.37 and finished third place. And that day was really special for the brand too, because it was the first time that HOKA had someone on a podium at a World Marathon Major. And then only a few weeks later, Adriaan debuted in the half marathon in Valencia and ran 59.13 in that shoe as well. So it's pretty special that the product is getting to a really good place, and now there's also athletes that are at a level to really make that product look pretty good. So yeah, it's a very exciting time, and I'm just really excited about the next couple of years and the push toward the LA Olympics in 2028.
Do you test the products that the athletes are wearing? Like, are you on the track spiked up trying to understand the technology for the athletes, or do you leave it to them to test and let you know how things are?
Well, one of the reasons that you don't see me out on any start line is that I was never anything special as an athlete, and maybe some of that has to do with the fact that I have size 13 feet, which is not at all the testing size when these brands are making their prototypes. Usually it's something more like 9, 10, something along those lines. So it's the athletes that are giving the feedback, and I trust them. They're competing at the highest level of the sport, and their feedback is super important. And so their feedback has been instrumental in the updates that have been made to the Cielo line. And so it was really cool to see that shoe keep getting better, and then to see what Alex and Adriaan did in Chicago and Valencia, I think was really validating, both for the athletes, but also for the footwear team that's doing an awesome job in Portland right now.
You mentioned didn't have too much of a background in the sport. I won't document that and chronicle that. You've talked about that on a bunch of different podcasts, but you had also mentioned, I think you had said 6 years in Portland under Rob Connor, learning under him. You get this job, which I think a lot of people from the outside thought was a big jump. You were announced as the head coach on October 12th, 2023. Today, February 10th, is 852 days later, so quite some time. I'd say you've more than proved yourself in that time, even with just the two results that you had mentioned. If you could go back to that, I think I said October 12th, that version of yourself, and compare it to your present February 10th self, what would you say is the biggest way that you view the sport of running differently?
That's a good question. How I view the sport differently, I think I had this view coming in, but it's been reinforced, which is at the professional level, every athlete is sort of like a gambler at a casino when you walk in, and everyone's trying to figure out which game they should play that can kind of net them the best result. It's like, do you go over to the penny slots? Do you go over to the blackjack tables? Do you go over to the poker table? And, the high stakes poker games, you need a special invitation for those. That might be like your Diamond League or your World Marathon Major type of events where it's high stakes, but if you can play well there, you can really make it big. But maybe the reason that our sport has struggled to get more eyeballs on it is because nobody wants to watch the security camera footage of a casino. They want to watch one high stakes game where all the best players are there. And right now, sometimes it feels like there's a good player playing the slots. There's a good player, rolling dice at the roulette table. And there's a good player that maybe is playing Texas Hold'em. And because so much of it is choose your own adventure, it can be really hard to follow at times. And I say all that, and it may sound pessimistic, but I also have found that it is really rewarding and really fun to work with athletes and help them figure out, what game should they be playing, what's going to play to their strengths, and then how to share their story around that in a way that's interesting, that can be marketed. Because I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that HOKA's not paying our team just to perform in a vacuum. They want us to inspire people. They want us to motivate people. And I don't think we just do that with how you perform. You do that by kind of pulling back the curtain and showing the journey. And so we've done a lot to invest in that, in terms of our YouTube channel. We have a creative director, Wes Salonen, who does a great job with that. But it's been a lot more fun to kind of work with each individual athlete and figure out, their path to success at the casino, so to speak. But yeah, that's probably how I view it right now.
So the elephant in the room when you say all that is I've never gambled, but I understand it enough. Gambling, going to the casino, winning assumes chance. It assumes that, you could be a skilled poker player at the high stakes table, and you could have a really good hand, but you don't know what everyone else, what they have. And you could have, gosh, I'm going back to the poker days when I'd play with my dad and my brother. So I might have this hand out of whack. You could have a 3 of a kind, but someone has a full house and beats you. Hopefully that's technically correct. And you had a really good hand, but chance just didn't have it in for you. Can you speak to chance in distance running? How you can have an athlete, you can have the perfect plan, they can execute it incredibly well, and they can sprain their ankle 2 days before the big event, or they can, get swept up by one of a million things that external pressure and factors would have for them, how life affects running, and their career doesn't pan out, a race doesn't pan out. I think we see this all the time with sort of high school prodigies, where you look back across multiple sports and it's just like, on paper, this should have made sense. They did the work, they put in the reps, it didn't pan out. How do you view chance in running?
Yeah, I think it's important to remind yourself that any performance that you have or any competition that you have is some combination of factors that you can influence and factors that you can't. And that's maybe why I've leaned so much into the heat the room analogy and focusing on really owning the things that are within our control. Because yeah, you can be in really good shape. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, we went out to Boston University and we had 3 guys who were in really good shape leading into it. And the day before, they came down with a sickness. It's just kind of 'tis the season. And that was kind of a multiply by 0 in a lot of ways. Like if you're not at 100% in this sport, it's going to get you. And so I think you kind of always have to have that perspective, as an athlete and as a coach, that it's going to be some combination of the two. And obviously you want to make sure that the mistake or the shortcoming wasn't anything that you could influence. And if it was, that you learned from it. But yeah, there's no 2 ways about it. So much of an actual outcome or a time or a place is determined somewhat by things that you can't control. And I guess that's maybe why the casino analogy sticks true, is you can be really good at a certain game, but there is always going to be an element of chance.
hopefully I'm getting this athlete right and remembering what I read on paper. I think I read somewhere that Alex Masai uh, didn't miss a workout for like 2 years or something like that. Um, that to me speaks to the ice cube analogy, where I think back to my career in the sport, what I know now from these 700 episodes of the podcast. If I could coach my high school self, and it would be like, stop shooting for 4 week block home runs. And instead, if you're healthy for 4 years, you're going to be really, really good. And that might look like running 10 miles a week less, on average for the 4 years. I think I had too much of the sort of professional gambler mindset of, I either want to go D1 and be the Ohio track and field state champion, or I don't want to run at all. When in reality, I think in hindsight, I would have rather had sort of I would be okay being a 425 miler and not having had made it, but been healthy and enjoyed competition and supporting my team and helping them out. All that being said, going back to present day, 2 years of no missed workouts, under your tutelage, it's a testament to your ability to keep an athlete healthy, consistent. Speak to that and how that directly, goes into the results he's having recently, just the no miss time.
He's a very special athlete. And I don't know if everyone knows much about Alex because he wasn't an NCAA champion. He ran at Hofstra University, so a smaller school, maybe wasn't on a lot of people's radar when he came through the NCAA system. But his older sister was a world champion in 2009 in the 10,000, and his brother, I think, was fourth at the Beijing Olympics in the 10,000. And so he comes from a running family where being a professional and, really owning the job on a day-to-day basis is just kind of what everybody does. But what's been so special about working with Alex is, you're correct. So he's done 3 marathons so far, Chicago in 2024, Rotterdam in 2025, and then Chicago in 2025. And the training plan that I wrote out for him at the start of those blocks was exactly how he executed it. And that never happens. So for it to happen 3 times is pretty special. But he really understands, I alluded to this before, but he really understands the trajectory of a training block and how to execute it appropriately. And I think the important thing about this is, so many people get focused on one workout as like, oh, this is the key workout to being successful. And it's not. Like, I come from a music background, and it's a little bit different than most people got to coaching. But what makes music beautiful is not any particular note. It's the space between the notes, or the sequencing of the notes, that makes a song really special. And I view a training block a lot like a song, in that, like, you have these really nice notes, these nice workouts, but it's the space between them and the rhythm of them and how they're constructed together that leaves you in a place that's really special at the end. And I think Alex understands the song better than just about any athlete that I've coached. He really understands, hey, this is a workout where we got to push, and this is one where we really just got to execute and nail the splits. And as soon as I'm done with this one, I'm looking at what's next, and I'm planning my life around that next one so that I can execute it. And he really kind of lives kind of in that space between all of these workouts. And he's always kind of keeping in mind the song and where he's at in the song, and how that rhythm is supposed to be. And because of that understanding, I think that's why he's been able to execute everything to a T. And then when he gets to the race, every marathon that he's run, whatever group he started in, he essentially won that group. So 2024 Chicago, he went out in the 209 group. By 30K, he had run away from everybody, essentially finished 9th place in 208.51. In Rotterdam, he went out in the 206.30 group. That day, to your point about the element of chance, there were 20 to 25 mile an hour winds that day. So everyone was kind of fighting the winds. He stayed tucked in, and the group that he was in, he was way back at 25K, kept moving up. And by the finish line, he was in 5th. And basically beat everybody except for the people that went out in the lead pack, and ran 208.03 in the wind that day. And then same thing happened in Chicago this fall, where he went out with the 205 group, and that group kind of bridged with the 204 group around halfway. And then he ended up moving to the front of that group. And then there was a couple, I think Jeffrey Camoir, Daniel Abenyo, a couple of those guys tried to break off the front of it and make another move and ended up paying the price. And Alex and Connor Mance kind of worked together and picked those guys off late. And then ultimately Alex pulled away in like the last kilometer. And so he only was behind Kip Limo, and one other guy that basically went out in the lead group. So he takes that mindset of executing and kind of seeing the whole block and the whole race as kind of this rhythmic thing, and really being in the moment. And he just does that so well. And I think it's led to what's allowed him to execute at these races.
My brother is a popular, famous musician, so I should understand music theory as you're describing it to me. I admittedly don't, but I'll riff off of what you said there. On the notes or I don't know, however you describe it, the moments where it's ready for a banger note, right? You're ready for a banger song, and it's a workout that the athlete knows matters because it won't make or break a session, it won't make or break a season, but it's enough time before where you get the adaptations, you've worked towards it, you build towards it. You might let the athlete go off a little bit. Something like I've read, a few weeks before a marathon, you'll have your athletes do, fatigue resistance sessions, things like, 3 miles at marathon pace, some mile repeats, another 3 miles at marathon pace, where the paces are going to look sexy on paper and they're really fit going into those sessions. As a coach, what do you feel like the morning of the sessions where you kind of let your athletes rip a little bit, test their fitness? And what's the communication with the athlete where they can get a lot of confidence out of that session, but you as the coach don't want to maybe overemphasize that this workout makes or breaks whichever way it goes. If it goes well, hey, we still got to stay on it. The race isn't there and this wasn't the race. And if it doesn't go well, hey, let's take the larger block into consideration. Let's get back on it before race day.
I think that's where your communication with the athlete has to be on point in the days leading up to it, because you have to be able to look for the clues that it might not go well, so that you don't show up on the day of that workout and are kind of hyping it up as what it could be if the athlete's not in a space to be able to do it. So oftentimes if there is key workouts in the segment, I'll lay that out for the athlete well in advance so they kind of know that it's coming. That's maybe different from some coaches. Some coaches like to kind of plan it the day of. I'm more of a planner. I think the athletes that I coach best tend to be a little bit more on that side of things. And so I give them a heads up that this is kind of when it's, when we're going to get after it. But then the whole time I'm monitoring their execution of the training throughout that. Because if they're not executing the steps that lead to it, it's probably going to be really hard for them to execute it at that time. And also they're probably not in a place where they can even adapt to that. And thus it's not a smart session, right? Because you only want to give an athlete a session that they can adapt to and get better from. Sometimes I think there's a little bit of, I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I'm going to sort of do it. My buddy and I used to call it Orange Theory mentality, which is just like, hey, if we get really tired, we're going to feel like we did something, and then thus we must be getting better. And I think that mentality maybe reigns supreme too much in our sport, where we're just trying to do a really impressive workout that maybe looks good on paper and makes us really tired, and thus we felt like we did something. But if you're not actually kind of targeting specific adaptations and adapting to them, it might not be the best idea, especially when you plan that session from a timing perspective. So I'm always trying to make sure that whatever session it is mimicking the demands of the race that they're preparing for one. And then I'm always making sure that, they're executing well in the lead up to it, and that the communication has been very clear, and that the athlete is feeling like they're kind of on top of the training before we do that session. And then the day of the session, it's very much like almost any other session, because it's known, the athlete knows, hey, today we're going for it. And there doesn't have to be this big, whatever, cheering or motivational speech that goes on ahead of time. It's time to do it. And, to the credit of our athletes, just about all of those sessions have gone really well in my time here.
What does your communication look like with the athlete pre-workout during workout, post-workout? Are you a yeller? Are you calm? Do you talk much at all? What does that look like?
I think it'd be good for you to ask my athletes that. Just more for me to know what their perception is, because I have my perception. My perception is that when the athletes get to the workout, I'm oftentimes asking them how they're doing, just on a human level, because I want to be aware of, did they all of a sudden not sleep really well last night, or are they not feeling so good, or do they have some stressor going on in their life that might impact what their ability is to execute the workout really well. I'm also trying to kind of keep it pretty lighthearted. I think this notion maybe that you have to be serious all the time. This sport is too hard if you're going to be serious all the time. I think one of the special things that I've learned from working with our Kenyan athletes in particular is that they have a really good way about finding joy in working really hard and finding joy in maybe what's something that we might shy away from, or something that's really challenging from a training perspective. So a lot of times it's asking athletes how they are. There's a little bit of joking around, I think, that goes on, because I do believe in, there should be some joy at practice. We're just running at the end of the day. We're not curing any disease or anything like that. So you might as well enjoy it, I think. But then they go out for their warm-up usually, and then when they come back from their warm-up, that's when a lot of it is more, all right, here's the details, here's what good execution would look like today. If things start to go south, here's how we're going to adjust it, so that it's very operative in terms of what we're looking for. And then once the athletes get going, I'm trying not to actually say too much to them. I'll give them some splits just as feedback, so they can kind of check the box that they're in a good space of executing well. But really, I'm just trying to observe. I'm trying to notice how hard they're working. I'm trying to notice, how strained they are. If they're communicating with their teammates or not. Just as kind of like a learning for me, and making sure that kind of the way that I envision the session going and how hard I envisioned it being is kind of how it's playing out, so that I can intervene if needed. But I think a lot of times there's a trap as a coach where you almost kind of feel the need to say something, to feel like you're doing something. But the reality is like the athlete in their experience, like they don't get that much feedback in a race anyways, and they should have a good idea of what good execution looks like, and they should be taking ownership of the session a little bit, where you're only kind of stepping in if things are really getting off the tracks. Otherwise, you're mostly just observing. And then afterwards, I try to be, if an athlete executed well, try to be really complimentary of that execution. And a lot of times I'll try to create a connection between what they just did and maybe a race that's out in the future, not by telling them like how fast they can run or anything like that, but just saying like, hey, the hills we just did today, that's a really good mimic of what you're going to experience at this race. So they kind of can draw that connection in their mind of how the training they just did was preparation for a race that they have coming up. So that's kind of how it is going out, is evaluating the level of execution, and then kind of talking about how that session can help the athlete in their training or their racing moving forward.
I want to double tap on something you said there, which was tell the athletes the workout, what good execution would look like, and then maybe what things would look like if things go south. I've heard enough people talk about the power of words and visualization. How do you view making them prepared if things go south, without maybe overly putting yourself in the shoes of them visualizing, hey, this workout could go south? Do you think about that distinction at all?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's very nuanced in terms of how you go about delivering that, particularly based on what the athlete's psyche is. For some athletes, if you entertain the idea of it not going well ahead of time, that's probably not going to put them in a good place to be able to execute. And for other people, it's just like, oh yeah, all right, cool. That's what I'll do if it doesn't, and so I think it starts again with that connection piece. That's so important. And I would say that usually the way that I'm phrasing it is, here's the plan. here's what we want to achieve. If we're not achieving that objective, in other words, if we're working way harder than we need to, it's all good. Here's how we're going to adjust it. If I'm there, usually we'll make some adjustments if, we're not kind of hitting it at a certain effort level. And so it's just kind of briefing them for the fact that, like, I think sometimes if you put something on paper, or you put splits on paper, the athlete only thinks that good execution is if you achieve those exact splits. But then you get out there and maybe there's 20-mile-an-hour winds, or, or it's really hot, or the athlete's by themselves versus working with someone else, or the athlete didn't sleep really well. And so what good execution has to look like is no longer a split that you may have wrote a week ago or something. It's achieving what the effort or the effort level was for the workout that you're trying to achieve.
How many notes do you have per athlete? How extensive are these notes on your athletes throughout the years? And do you ever use AI in your analysis of your athletes?
I've not used AI.
Okay.
I think once we start using AI,
no going back.
Well, yeah. I think you just can never replace the art, the combination of the art and the emotion and the interpersonal connection combined with the knowledge and the science and the logic that a human brain can provide. And so, no, I have not. But I do take a lot of notes on athletes. I think maybe our athletes would tell you that I carry around a notebook a lot, and I'm always jotting things down, especially at workouts. And I think it's just a good way to help remind yourself of things. If you write stuff down, there's a better chance that you'll commit it to memory than if you just kind of notice and go, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, it is pretty extensive, and but I think that's good. I mean, ultimately, what I'm trying to do is gain a better understanding of the athlete that I'm coaching, so that I'm coaching them in such a way that is going to help them achieve the goals that they have.
I don't know how much you've studied AI, but I'm sure you're a very smart, intuitive guy. You read more books than, gosh, in the past month than I probably have in the past year. Not proud to admit that, but I know you're a learner, so I'm sure you understand the substance of AI. It will never replace the human component, right? So there will, I think, unless Elon makes these Tesla robots that good, I don't think an athlete would want it telling instructions. But I don't think AI will ever replace you telling me the workout or you having the emotion for me after a race or a workout goes well or doesn't go well. But do you think we'll ever get to the day where it's just so advanced and so smart in terms of training theory, Jack Daniels times a million understanding, that coaches will rely on it to create training plans because of just the billions of systems it runs to formulate these thoughts?
Potentially. I would like to think that at the razor's edge of our sport, kind of tip of the spear, where you're working in the fine margins, that a human coach is always going to be more valuable to have. But, if you're somebody that is looking to get off the couch and go run a 5K, or you're somebody that's looking to run your first marathon, I think you can gain a lot from just an AI generated training plan, because this is no offense to any online coach out there. There's a lot out there on the internet right now that, would probably be about the same as what you get from asking AI. But I think the difference, right, is that connection piece of connecting really well with an athlete, understanding their mind, understanding how they think about things, what their experience is like. And so even if there is like a scientifically backed training plan for an athlete, you got to be able to plan for the adjustments to that, right? What happens if the athlete doesn't sleep really well, or what happens if the athlete gets sick, or whatever it might be, right? Like, I think so much of coaching is being the master of the audible, and how do we adjust and change? I think this analogy has been used many times, but A lot of times as a coach, you're like the GPS, and the athlete's putting in the location of where they want to go. But if they turn left when you say to turn right, your job is to kind of help them reroute. And I don't know how well AI will ever be able to do that, especially in the moment. And so I think that's where the human component of coaching, if you can have someone that's invested in you at that level, will always be valuable.
I think that you make a good point about the online coaching sort of thing. I want to run this thought by you. I think at the base level of the average runner, I would say even maybe to the mid to moderate successful high school runner, consistency is the number one differentiating marker. But as you go into high level NCAA and then high level professional running, everyone sleeps well, everyone normatechs, everyone knows proper nutrition, everyone's, remarkably consistent. Sure, there are some anomalies where you will hear crazy stories and an athlete just pulls it off who does, eats like shit and maybe misses some days. But for the most part, at the top level, everyone's doing the same things. And so you have to figure out, okay, what are those differentiating markers? Would you generally agree in terms of just like this podcast, if we were talking to a 40-year-old who just picked up running, their path to quote unquote success and being good is actually remarkably simple. It's like stay healthy, run 3 days a week, maybe not even do work. Like you'll get better. You don't even need to do workouts at that point. But if I'm asking you, okay, how do we get Alex to 2:02 in the marathon? Sure, you'll still probably mention consistency, but it's going to look remarkably different. Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think maybe one of the challenges to development in the sport is that when you start out, say it's elementary school, middle school, high school, whenever you start cross-country track, oftentimes if you just put a little bit more into it and you work a little bit harder, you get better. And that continues to be the case for a long time. You work a little bit harder at it, you'll get a little bit better. You put a little more into it, you'll get a little bit better. I feel like at this level, it's not working harder is not necessarily always the answer anymore, but that pattern or that habit pattern has gotten so ingrained in your mind that oftentimes the challenge that I have at this level is getting an athlete to slow down or getting an athlete to do a little bit less at times because they're not allowing themselves to fully recover. And that's probably the challenge here. And I think that's the challenge for me with somebody like Alex is figuring out, okay, how much can we do in training to really prepare to run something like you said, like a 2:02, but do so in a way where there's going to be enough recovery, there's going to be enough adaptation. And, it's not just like throw everything at the wall and see if you can do it. That's more the I guess the challenge at this level. But yeah, if you're just looking to get off the couch, I mean, if you run one day a week, you're going to get better. And then if you turn that 1 into 2, you're going to get better. And then 3, you'll get better. And maybe you try to sleep a couple extra hours. Like everything that you kind of add, you will get better for a long time. It's just at this level, the addition part can become something of a challenge if you start to kind of reach that capacity where you're not allowing enough space for recovery and absorption of what you're doing.
This is interesting. I use AI for a good bit of my work just to refine different things, bounce different ideas off of it. So I already had a file working for just analyzing the show notes we had for you and potential angle points. And the reason I knew that 1 by 3 mile, 3 by 1 mile, it was because of AI. So it already had some things working. So I said, do you think AI could ever get to the point where it replaces him as a coach? So this is interesting. Short answer, AI will replace parts of what he does. It will never replace what actually makes him good. You can breathe a sigh of relief there. Here's the breakdown. What AI can already do better than most coaches: training plan generation, pace calculation, altitude conversions, blah, 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 blah. Goes on about that. What AI cannot do, and this is where Jack lives, and it basically goes on to talk about emotional intelligence. That's not data, that's emotional intelligence under pressure. After it breaks down the things you've done in your career, it's scary how much AI knows about us. It's knowing, and it gets so cinematic. It's knowing that Masai needs to write, "I'm an Olympian" on a whiteboard every morning, and knowing which athlete would find that ridiculous and need something completely different. The real threat isn't replacement, it's commoditization. The danger for coaches isn't that AI takes their job, it's that AI makes the training plan part of their job worth zero. When every runner can get a world-class periodized plan from an app for $15 a month, the coaches who survive will be the ones whose value was never really in the plan to begin with. It was in the relationship, the accountability, the hard conversation at the right moment, the ability to make an athlete believe something about themselves that isn't yet true. That's Jack's actual edge. He's a finance major who became a coach because he understood that the human side is the product. AI will make the X's and O's coaches obsolete. It'll make the Jack Mullaney's more valuable. It's interesting. How do you feel? Spot on or no?
Well, I think AI is it's smart enough to recognize its limitations. I'll say that much. I won't comment on anything that is said about me because it's AI generated. So I couldn't possibly say that. But what I will say is, if you ask any athlete about a coach that they really liked or that had an impact on them, the answers that you get will have nothing to do with, oh, I thought they were a training whiz. So much of it is about the connection that they built with the athlete, or the example that they set for the athlete, or the time that they were down and the coach was really there for the athlete. It has so much more to do about interpersonal relationships, and we're all human beings. And so we crave that connection, especially in the pursuit of a really audacious goal. And that's where I think coaches have a lot of opportunity. And that's kind of where I try to put as much of my time and energy as I can. We all have our limitations, and we're not perfect because we are human. But yeah, if every day you're just getting your training plan from an AI generated device, I think it's going to be really hard to feel like anyone else is in it with you. So I guess that's kind of how I would say it. And credit AI, I guess it realizes its limitations in what it's able to do for an athlete.
Yeah, spot on. I like it. And I chuckle. I don't love asking those questions, but I think they're interesting with the way the world is going. And I think we would have laughed at our first conversation with each other in time, looking ahead to this conversation, asking that question. And it's just crazy how fast the world is moving. The fact that that's even a question I'm asking. 5 years ago, I would have said, what's AI? What's ChatGPT? What are you talking about? So the world changes, the sport changes, and appreciative of someone of your stature for answering those sorts of questions. We're at time here. I could talk to you for 5 hours. We'll have to do that sometime. But final question for you, hot off the press, and as much as you can be honest with me, please do so. I have my strong opinions about this. I'm pleased to announce you'll be flying to New York City this summer in July, not Eugene, Oregon. I'm sure you saw that. What's the honest raw take that you won't have 4 connections on your way to Eugene, Oregon, and might have enough hotels in the city to stay at with your athletes?
I think it's cool to move the championships around a little bit. I think there's always a little bit of a space to try something in a year where there's not a Worlds or an Olympics to qualify for. There certainly is a lot of history and tradition at Hayward Field, and I think a lot of times when people think about the Olympic trials and dream of making an Olympic team, because it's been at Hayward so many times, that's just the place they have in their mind. So there is something special about Eugene. I'm not going to discount it, but I do think because this summer, we're not qualifying for a world championship or an Olympics, it's cool to try somewhere else. And New York City is a great place. I mean, Icon Stadium within New York City is very hard to get to. It's easy to get to New York City. It might be hard actually to get to Icon. But I do think it allows us the opportunity to have our sport exposed to new eyeballs. And, I know the Athlos meet has been out there, and that's been really good for the sport to try to get some new people watching track and field. And so hopefully we can build upon that. I do like the idea of being in a city, in a place where there's just a lot of people and it's a little bit more disruptive. I think that's one of the things I love so much about the marathon is it's hard to not pay attention. If you're in New York City, for example, the first Sunday in November and people are running through the city. So it's a good way to get people to pay attention. And I'm just excited to go somewhere kind of new, and just experience what the U.S. Championship will be like. And after this year, we can get back on the podcast and decide if it was good and if we should use it moving forward. But actually, I remember one of the first track meets I ever went to when I was younger, when I was just getting into the sport, was the Diamond League when it was in New York City. Back in the day, they had a Diamond League on at Icon Stadium, and it was a great event. And so I think us having the opportunity to go out there, hopefully we can kind of revitalize some of the energy that used to happen with that meet as well.
I just hope. Yeah, I'm admittingly a little bit of a Eugene hater just because it's so hard to get to and hotels are so. I just don't think it has the infrastructure for the U.S. Championships. Face value, just you take the track, nothing's beating that in the States, and I can admit that. But my hope is that we see these meets, like something in New York City, go crazy to the point where we could think, okay, if we could get an investor, if we could get a Hayward Field built in New York City, we could fill it because the population is totally sprung for that. And people in that city are looking for something to go to on a hot July night and watch the biggest, fastest people in the world clash. So I hope it's successful, but I will give Eugene its flowers if I'm being sensible and letting those parts speak. I think it's served our sports wonders. And it's a special place. It's a special stadium. The athletes I talked to describe how cool it is to compete in that stadium, and you can't take history away from it. And it'll always have that. So sometimes I joke a little bit too much on the podcast, and maybe that side of me came out. I appreciate Eugene, but maybe the parts of me that have had crazy tough journeys to get there are speaking louder. It's a hard place to get to.
It is a hard place to get to, but perhaps if we can continue to build the audience for this sport and you get enough people that do want to travel out there and make the journey, it can be really cool. Because I think about all of the other venues that are iconic in sports, right? You think about Augusta National for golf. Augusta, Georgia is not exactly it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. You think about in softball, women's college softball, it's Oklahoma City. That's where you're going to. College baseball, it's Omaha. That's the iconic venue that you're going to. So it's not always that these iconic venues are in places that are easy to get to, but if the sport generates enough popularity, there's enough want to on the part of the fans. I'm sure we all would wish that, Eugene hotels wouldn't, 5x their prices the weekend that we all want to be in Eugene. I think that might be is maybe something that makes people more frustrated. But Eugene itself, I mean,
you're an Oregon guy. There's so many. Portland.
There's so many iconic moments that have happened at Hayward Field that it would feel a little weird to be trying to make a team, say in 2028, and you're doing it somewhere else. Sure. However, if they want to do it in the Coliseum, we're definitely down for that.
Yeah, that was my last point. Is my first year flying to USA's, I didn't pay for it because the brand did, but my flight alone was $1,200. There's no even in my current state, making a full-time living. I don't think I justify spending that much on just a flight for any sporting event. You could, even if everything was covered at the Super Bowl and all I had to pay for was my flight and it cost $1,200, I think I'd say no. It's a lot of money. So to assume that, from USATF that we're going to get young fans of the sport in seats, yeah, maybe if their dad's a hedge fund guy, but most of the people watching the sport, me growing up, I wouldn't have been able to afford it. And I'd be curious if a listener wants to use AI and go down a rabbit hole and email Jack and I an analysis of what makes Augusta different and how they fill seats there. I would love to see it because I'm sure there's studies and findings there. But more parts of this sport to solve another day, Jack, when we have more time. But thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. You're one of the most articulate speakers I've ever come across, and I'm always impressed by you. Even my first question, just no hesitation, hop right in, no ums or buts, right into a banger of an analogy. So yeah, you're amazing, man. Keep being a gift to the sport, a gift to the world, and always am blessed by our conversations. Really appreciate you and cheering you on this year.
Well, thanks, Dominic, and thank you for what you do to help amplify the stories of the sport. I know I've been a listener, and some of the guests you've had on have inspired me or I've learned something from them. And I certainly know that I'm not the only one. So I appreciate everything you do as well.